How do you do? It's Mr. Moo. How you doing? Last weekend I participated in the ScoreSpace Jam 11. I formed a team with my siblings and my roommate, and we had kind of a big team, but most people didn't have any Unity experience at all or any sort of game development experience. So this was a really good learning experience for them. It was also a really good learning experience for me because this was the first time that I was kind of in charge of kind of delegating tasks and collaborating and kind of organizing the game from the beginning. So let's get into it. I'm going to take you through the process of creating this game and what we ended up with. So the theme of the Game Jam was teleportation, and the rules of the Game Jam dictated that we needed to make a high score game. So we started brainstorming, and one of my sisters, who had never made any game before, had insisted on having bunnies in the game. She said,
if I'm gonna do this, if I'm gonna spend all weekend on this game, there gotta be some bunnies.
So we started thinking where we can go with that. One thing that was suggested was bunny basketball, and we were thinking, okay, maybe we can just make one of those classic let's swipe up to shoot the ball kind of games. Get into the basket, however many you can make in a certain time period, that would be your score. But that type of game had been done a million times, so we wanted to make something a little more unique. So we thought, ooh, what if we were juggling these bunnies? What would that look like? So we kind of had this base idea that the player would be able to control two hands, one with the arrow keys, the right hand with the arrow keys, and then the left hand with the WASD keys. And then the bunnies would be falling from the sky, and we would kind of be bouncing them back and forth. So that was kind of our goal, to simulate real juggling, but virtually. We started thinking of the different names that we could have for the game. One name that we liked was Hairs in the Air, but then ultimately we decided on Juggle Bunnies, which in my opinion had a little more of a ring to it. We also had this idea that the players would have some sort of objective besides just juggling the balls, because we were also presented with another problem, that if we just kept on dropping bunnies from the sky, that eventually there were going to be too many bunnies that it would be impossible to juggle them all, or they would just cap off at a certain point. And I guess that would work, but we wanted the game to be more dynamic than that, because if someone was able to find the sweet spot, then they can just do it infinitely, and we wanted to kind of avoid that. We wanted to be changing constantly. So we introduced this idea of a basket, and you would get extra points if you got the bunny in the basket. We were still missing kind of the aesthetic of the game. All we knew that the bunnies were the balls. So my other sister, who was doing the art, she made the first draft of the bunny, and let me say, it was a bit unsettling. So we decided to go with a cuter approach. And I got to thinking what this basket would look like. And then I thought of the most classic magic trick of all time, the magician pulling the bunny out of a hat. But instead, for our case, maybe the bunny would go into the hat and then disappear. So this kind of set the tone for the whole game. We would be entertainers on a stage juggling these bunnies, and it had kind of a circus theme, had kind of a theater theme, and so when the art started pouring in, the tone of the game really started to be set. It was also during this time that I kind of realized we kind of lost sight of the theme of the jam. Teleportation was just not really in it at all. So what I had done was I added these portals at the top where the bunnies would fall from, and I said, yeah, that's good enough for the theme. We don't need to go any further than that. I added this particle system so that when a bunny would fall into the hat, particles would burst out of the hat, kind of like confetti. And I used the sprite of the tail of the bunny, and it ended up looking like popcorn, which was still kind of on brand. We didn't really have too much of a vibe, and we were kind of creating it as we go. It kind of worked, so we kept it. I made a countdown at the beginning of each round where the bunny would have 3 ears, and at each number in the countdown, counting back from 3, it would lose 1 ear, and then at 0 it would disappear and then jump away. I added this weird and funny sound effects for the countdown, and also other places, like when the bunny hit the ground. I took the sound of a little girl screaming and then I pitched it up and it made like this squirrel noise, and that also kind of worked, and it was like unsettling but also kind of cute, which ended up being kind of the entire vibe of the game, by the way. My brother added this looping sad soundtrack, appropriately named Sad Circus. Then we just kept polishing. Added a main menu, a pause screen, an end screen. We tweaked the game a lot so that it would work with what we were trying to do, which was to simulate juggling. And it turned out pretty well. You actually had to control each of these hands and make the bunnies bounce between each hand. We kind of added a tilt to the hands so that if the bunny bounced on the right hand, it would fly to the left side of the screen, and vice versa. It was really hard to get the bunny into the hat. But even with that, it was still pretty fun. So we were happy with what we created, and we said, good enough. No need to go any further. And we submitted the game with plenty of time left on the clock. Once submission time ended, people started playing our game. I was playing other people's games, which, by the way, there were some really cool games out there. So if you participated in this game jam, props to you, because there were so many cool games. And I have to say that almost all of them were much more on theme than ours was. And we were properly penalized for it in our ratings. So we came in 28th out of 73. But if you notice, where we lost the most points was not sticking to theme. We were quite close to the bottom of the list when it came to that. So that really dragged down our overall score. But people really liked it. People really enjoyed the weirdness of the game and the aesthetic of the game. And most of the people actually enjoyed how challenging it was to get a bunny in a hat. So I'm going to give you 3 of my takeaways from this game jam, just so that there's a learning experience from all of this. The first one, which I think most people already know, but it's one of those lessons that you kind of have to remind yourself every time you're making a game, which is that your game is going to be even harder than you think it is. And we thought this game was challenging, so I can't even imagine what other people thought. Well, actually, I can't imagine, because everyone was commenting about how challenging it was, and that sometimes some people couldn't even get one bunny into the hat, which was completely understandable because the mechanic was quite difficult and the hole of the hat was very small. So just keep in mind that when you're making a game mechanic, you know exactly how it behaves. And not only that, but during development, you had plenty of time to practice this mechanic, where anyone who just picks up your game or just opens your game and plays it, they're not going to know how that works, and they're not going to have that same experience. So just keep that in mind when you're making your own game. Number 2, during game development, and especially during game jams, get creative with it. Don't be so afraid to do something really weird, and don't be scared that people are not going to like your unique style or taste, because actually the inverse is true. There are so many games out that the way that you can make your game unique to everyone else is by putting a piece of yourself into the game. That's the stuff that everyone really liked. People really liked the weird music. People really liked the unsettling feel of the game. Everyone really liked how weird it was and the aesthetic. We came in 10th in the aesthetic, by the way, which was cool. And that's actually the stuff that we had the most fun doing. So really embrace that side of game development, because that's the stuff that people will actually enjoy the most from your game. And number 3, this really only applies to me and my team, but if you want to do well in a game jam, you should probably stick to the theme. You can actually play Juggle Bunnies in your browser on itch.io. You don't need to pay or download anything, and I'll leave a link in the description so that you can go check it out. My high score is 2390, and that's only getting 4 bunnies in the hat. So if you can do better than that, I'll be very impressed, because like I said before, this game is quite challenging. If you made it this far in the video, thanks for watching. I really appreciate everyone that likes and subscribes. I respond to all 2 of my comments. I'm really trying to put a lot more effort into making higher quality content. So if you liked what you see, please consider subscribing. In any case, catch you in the next one.